On August 22, 1965, in the Canadian city of Winnipeg, Janet and Ron Reimer welcomed the birth of their twin sons, Bruce and Brian. Born healthy and full term, the boys marked a joyous chapter in the Reimers' lives, particularly for Janet, who had always longed for children. But within 2 years, a devastating medical accident and a radical psychological theory would turn the life of one of these boys into one of the most disturbing human case studies in modern medicine. This is the haunting story of Dr. John Money and the so-called Joan case, an experiment that would have far-reaching implications for gender identity, child psychology, and the ethical limits of science. When Bruce and Brian were 7 months old, they began to suffer from phimosis, a common condition in infants where the foreskin is too tight. The recommended treatment at the time was circumcision. On April 27, 1966, the boys were taken to a local hospital for the procedure. But rather than using a traditional surgical blade, the attending physician opted for a then experimental method, electrocautery, a device that uses electric current to remove tissue. It was a catastrophic mistake. The device malfunctioned, and in a horrifying accident, Bruce's penis was burned beyond surgical repair. The tissue was destroyed. Brian, thankfully, had his procedure canceled. The Reimers were devastated. In the 1960s, there were no options for effective reconstructive surgery for infants. Faced with what seemed to be a lifetime of trauma and dysfunction for Bruce, they searched desperately for a solution. Then, one day, Janet Reimer watched a television program that would change everything. It featured a charismatic psychologist and sexologist from Johns Hopkins University named Dr. John Money. Born in New Zealand and educated in the United States, Dr. John Money had gained international attention for his work with intersex individuals, people born with ambiguous genitalia. Money was a pioneer in the field of sexology, and at the time, his reputation was unmatched. His theories were radical and persuasive. Most notably, he believed that gender identity was learned, not innate. On the TV program, Money introduced a trans woman who had transitioned with his guidance and appeared confident, feminine, and socially successful. To the Reimers, Money's work seemed miraculous. They wrote to him asking for help. Dr. Money replied quickly and invited them to Baltimore, Maryland to discuss a potential solution. What he proposed was revolutionary and terrifying. Money believed that if Bruce were raised as a girl, he could adapt to that identity seamlessly, provided the transition occurred early enough in his life. According to his theory, gender identity was shaped by upbringing, not biology. He urged the Reimers to have Bruce undergo surgical castration and then raise him entirely as a female. It was, he claimed, the best possible path to a normal life. At just 18 months old, Bruce Reimer underwent orchiectomy, the surgical removal of the testes. Surgeons constructed a rudimentary vulva, and his name was changed to Brenda. The family was instructed to never reveal the truth to Brenda. Instead, they were to treat her as a typical girl and reinforce feminine behaviors. Dr. Money's theory centered on the idea of a gender gate, a critical window in early childhood during which gender identity could be permanently shaped by environmental and parental influence. Brenda became his ideal case. The fact that she had an identical twin, Brian, who was raised as a boy, offered the perfect control subject for his theory. Money was eager to prove that nurture could override nature. In academic journals, he published the case under the pseudonyms John and Joan, hailing it as a groundbreaking success. He claimed that Brenda was adapting well, showing feminine behavior, and thriving in her new identity. The case quickly became a darling of the psychological and feminist communities, who sought to challenge the rigid biological view of gender. But behind the scenes, the reality was very different. Despite the surgeries, the clothing, and the forced socialization, Brenda never truly felt like a girl. She gravitated toward rough-and-tumble play, preferred male playmates, and hated wearing dresses. At school, she was bullied for her appearance and mannerisms. Socially isolated and confused, Brenda exhibited signs of deep distress. At home, the Reimers struggled to maintain the facade. Brenda resisted all attempts to feminize her. Her confusion turned to anger and depression. And all the while, Dr. Money remained insistent that his treatment was working. He dismissed the family's concerns and doubled down on his belief that Brenda's behavior was just a phase. His annual visits with the twins became increasingly disturbing. Under the guise of therapy, he also showed them explicit images of sex and childbirth, pushing Brenda toward further surgeries. These sessions left both children traumatized. By age 11, her mental health had deteriorated severely. At last, when Brenda was 13 years old, her parents broke down. They revealed the truth. She had been born a boy, and the treatment was an experiment. Rather than being devastated, Brenda felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Everything she had instinctively felt, that something was wrong, was finally validated. She rejected her assigned identity and chose to live as a male once again. Brenda became David. With money won from a medical malpractice settlement, David began the painful process of transitioning back. He underwent surgeries to construct a functional penis and started hormone therapy with testosterone. Though the results were imperfect, for the first time in his life, David felt some measure of alignment between his body and mind. In his 20s, David met a woman named Jane Fontaine, a mother of 3. They married, and for a time, he experienced a fleeting sense of happiness. David even became a stepfather to her children. But the scars, emotional, psychological, and physical, never truly healed. David's twin brother Brian had also been deeply affected by the years of secrecy and manipulation. Their bond, once unbreakable, had been fractured by confusion, shame, and psychological damage. As they grew older, Brian developed severe mental health issues, including schizophrenia and clinical depression. In 2002, Brian was found dead of an apparent drug overdose. The loss devastated David. Then, in 2004, David's marriage began to unravel. Jane had asked for a short separation, hoping it might help ease the tension in their strained relationship. But for David, it was the final blow. On May 4th, 2004, just 2 days after their separation, David took a shotgun, drove to a nearby parking lot, and ended his life. He was only 38 years old. Throughout the years, Dr. John Money continued to publish the John/Joan case as a success. Even long after David had rejected his female identity, Money made no effort to correct the academic record. He never publicly admitted any wrongdoing. To the end, he insisted that the Reimers had waited too long to begin Brenda's reassignment, and that his methods had been sound. Yet David Reimer's tragic story eventually came to light. In 1997, journalist John Colapinto published an expose in Rolling Stone, later expanded into the book As Nature Made Him, which exposed the truth behind the case. It was a bombshell that shattered the credibility of Dr. Money's work and changed the field of psychology forever.